Hi, Rolled Spine Podcast. Tom Savini here. I'll do your blurb at the end of all this, but I thought since you're spending this money that I would give you a little bit of a tour of the monsters at my place. We've got to go through my gym first, but they're all monsters in the gym, at least aliens. That's his brother over there. I spent most of the lockdown back here with all my friends. I do consider them my friends. Some of them are my children, like Dr. Tung from Day of the Dead. I got to refurbish him back here. Got to create a Vincent Price House of Wax because I found this great hat. Here's Fluffy from Creepshow that I sculpted a few years ago. And let's see what else. Oh, if you've seen From Dusk Till Dawn, that's my head that George Clooney tears off, and then Juliette Lewis shoots me in the eyeball with an arrow. Sometimes I collect my action figures life-size, like the alien over here, and the Predator. That's the entrance to my garage. You can see it's surrounded by famous monsters. There's some more of the collection. I even have bodies on the ceiling. That's Wilson. This guy here was in Day of the Dead. This is Greg Nicotero from Disney's movie Gross Anatomy. And this is him before they skinned him. Okay, so, ready for promo time? Okay. Hi, it's Tom Savini. Welcome to ZombiCast and Dawn of the Dead with your host, Diabolu Frank. Or is it Frank Diabolu? I don't know. But welcome to Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead contains scenes of violence that may be considered shocking. No one under 17 will be admitted.
Roger is greatly concerned. He looks at one of the other men, a young, smooth-faced rookie. The boy doesn't know how to react. He is obviously nervous.
You're Rod, right? Rod Tucker.
Wooly.
How the hell come we stick these low-life bastards in these big-ass fancy hotels anyway? Shit, man, this is better than I got. Hey, you ain't gonna talk them out of here. You gotta blow them out. Blow their asses.
The boy had listened to this sickening tirade, and his face was ashen. Roger was pleased that in this confusion and terror, he was able to add a word or two of human kindness. Wouldn't Louise be surprised at him now? She was always screaming at him that he didn't have an ounce of human kindness or consideration in his 5'10", 175-pound muscular body. She claimed he loved his guns and his Vietnam medals of commendation more than her, and sometimes he wondered if he did too. He often wondered if her attraction to him was only physical. He was often told by women that his sandy hair, well-chiseled face, and good build really turned them on. But for all her screaming and hollering at him, he would give anything to be with her now, curled up on the sofa, watching Johnny Carson. Even though they'd been divorced for almost 2 years, he would marry her all over again, just to be away from this mess.
Roger.
Just stay cool, okay? When we go in there, don't pop off, all right?
The boy nods, grateful for more human contact.
I'll be okay.
Wooly.
Come on, let's get on with it. This is a waste of my time.
Crash. Without warning, the metal door to the fire stair bursts open, and several figures rush out of the darkness. Shots are fired from handguns. A bullet smashes through the skull of the young boy next to Roger. He falls against Roger with a pleading expression on his face. Figures charge this way and that. More gunfire. The other SWAT men dodge and dive for cover. Wooly opens fire with his automatic weapon. On the street, the commander, hearing the gunfire, barks into the bullhorn. Commander.
Move it! Move it! Move it!
Sergeant, into walkie-talkie.
All units, full operation!
On the roof, Roger struggles against the dead weight of the young man. He tries to free himself and his weapons. Shots ring out. A handful of black and Puerto Rican youngsters charge about the rooftop. Another SWAT patrol appears from behind a large elevator housing. The young civilians retreat. Several are mowed down. Another bullet smashes against the dead SWAT man's back. Just as Roger frees himself, a bullet catches him squarely in the chest, but his armor takes the impact. He is thrown back off balance, and he struggles to catch his wind as he scrambles over to recover his weapon, which skitters away across the rooftop. Before he reaches the gun, he is cut off by the looming figure of one of the black youths, pistol in hand. Roger freezes. The young man aims his handgun, but hesitates. A sudden barrage of bullets rips through the young black man and he falls in a pool of blood. It was Wooley's gun that killed him.
Roger looked around quickly, still not believing his close escape. He felt like crossing himself, something he had not done since he was an 8-year-old altar boy.
Wooley.
Come on, you dumb bastards! Come and get him!
He fires again and again, even though the skirmish is winding down.
This'll cry from 1,000 pigs!
The previous material was excerpted from the 1977 working draft of the motion picture Dawn of the Dead by George A. Romero, sound clips from the film itself, and elements from the novelization by Susanna Sparrow, as read by Jonathan Davis from the audiobook. In the extended cut, our minute begins 8 seconds in, with Roger coaching Rod Tucker, the young officer on roof. We see various officers moving in the background and later in the scene, none of whom I am as yet familiar with. Joe Shelby is the first to burst through the roof egress from the tenement proper.
John Amplis.
John Amplis.
Uh-oh, Rod just got it in the head.
And what about the whole idea of tenements and the racial thing? You know, I mean, this is
a
big deal.
Yeah.
John Amplis begins his brief cameo here, and from the script's description, you might think that this is also the end of his cameo. As it happens, not, but we'll go into detail on that later. Once the shooting starts, we get another brief glimpse of Fred Baker's commander character and his aged sergeant. As described in the script and novelization, there's supposed to be a lot more people on that roof of a broader range of ages and ethnicities. To my knowledge, none of the actors here are Puerto Rican or African American, though we will have a better mix among the cops and those residing within the tenement. Amplis has a difficult to decipher line, which I believe comes to, Jesus Christ, there's 1,000 pigs. I believe the Italian edit makes a point of truncating the line to just Christ to diminish the sacrilege. The bearded assailant is shot dead in the chest near the chimney that his blood splatters against. The clean-shaven assailant takes a rifle shot to the chest after an indecipherable scream while foolishly standing out in the open. Right at the 8-minute mark, Joe Shelby's character fires his revolver and shouts, Rico, look out. This will be important later. The psycho racist cop Woolsey blasts him with a shotgun, and we're treated to a back view of the exit wound raining chunks of wet meat. That's 8:04. I usually have a running commentary between tracks, but this sequence is fairly consistent across all cuts. A testament to Romero's deft hand as a pioneer of quick cut action. The European edition starts at 7:34 due to the extra time spent in the WGON TV studio and ends at 8:30. It also features an extra line from Wooley hissing blow all their asses. The theatrical cut starts at 6:23 and you oddly hear the 1,000 pigs line twice, the first time overlaid onto the shot of Roger catching Rod's corpse. The Italian cut is notable for relying entirely on background sound effect, while the other cuts mostly do the same. Eric Toren's Dramatic Moments #1 kicks in around 7:45 on our extended guide until near the end of its minute. WGON Radio is a podcast that has been covering Dawn of the Dead and the greater Romero oeuvre for longer than I have and across more episodes, but also with twice as long of a pod fade to date. They blessedly interviewed Paul Macaluso for their second episode. Credited on IMDb but not in the film as Afro-haired Puerto Rican gang member on roof, Macaluso is the third armed tenement defender out of the entry door, the clean-shaven one with a rifle. Since I've been following the guest list of Living Dead Weekend, I don't think he's made an appearance. There's nothing on this guy in my research material, and he never appeared in another movie. Excuse me while I borrow extensively from this show, as Macaluso demonstrates himself to be a very capable storyteller and an invaluable resource on the Monroeville Mall of the period.
We now bring you our very special interview with Paul Macaluso.
Funny story, I had just gotten out of high school and I had leading a musical for guys and dolls for an area called Penn Hills, which was a very huge district, about 1,300 and some odd kids in the graduating classes. So coming off of that, I went to Boys Community College, which was in Monroeville. I took an acting class and landed a lead for Kurt Vonnegut play, which was covered by local press and that. Around the same time the thing was going on with, and I was working at a boutique downtown. Some guy walks in one day. This is, a funny story. And I'm showing him some clothes, and that's what I did part-time, He said, they're taking auditions for Romero's new film, Dawn of the Dead, right down the road. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, they're doing auditions right down there. I said, can you give me the address? So he gave me the address, and I love that. I run down on my lunch break. I'm running downtown. It's like 3 or 4 blocks, hot out, summertime, and I'm trucking down there, and they look at me, and they hand me a script, and they say, they outline, what they want me to read. So I'm sitting there for about 5 minutes. There's probably 15 17, 18 guys in this room. So I'm reading it over. Okay, looks pretty good, pretty easy, action pack. I forget what the scene was. I think it was the scene with the guy, the blonde-haired, shorter guy that had the lead with the black guy, the two cops, and it was those two going back and forth. So I walk in Romero's office. He's sitting there with what I guess I assumed ended up being his wife down the road, his secretary at the time. And I see Romero just looking at me. He's looking at me across the desk, and he's got this twinkle in his eye, and he's smiling. I read for the lead, because after the movie came out, then I saw the dialogue that went down was between the blonde-haired cat and the black guy, both of them being the cops. It was a scene between them two. I think it was in the trucks. They were running with the trucks, and they were going to block off the mall. And he was like, yeah, man. The little blonde-haired cat was like, yeah, man, we can do this. Yeah. And he was all fired up like he hadn't slept in like 4 or 5 days or whatever the thing was. Yeah, I read for him. It was cool, and I didn't realize that I was reading for one of the lead roles. I really didn't have an extensive background other than the musical and having lead in that, and in the community college thing. So maybe Romero was looking at it like, yeah, this guy's not a name that was really well known. But then again, the guys that had the leads, nobody was really a well-known actor in that whole movie. If he would have picked me for the lead, that would have been phenomenal. I could have dealt with that. That would have been great, man. Go down one of the biggest cult flicks in history and have the lead role. Yeah, that would have been fun. I don't think it was exactly the guy who actually got picked. I really didn't pay much attention to him physically and facially. I was nervous. I went in, I read my piece, he read his piece. We're sitting side by side, and my eye contact really was with Romero more than it was him, but it definitely fit his stature and size. I really just don't think it was him. I think his cat was more laid back. I don't think it was the black gentleman that I saw in the movie. I don't believe it was him. And I had time to think it out so that I could improvise vocally and with hand gesture what the scene was. And I had done that. I brought a lot of enthusiasm to that part. He just was smiling the whole time. He's like, okay, guys, thanks for the read. He got up, we shook hands, and he was just smiling at me, and he was amused, whatever, good or bad, he was amused at the reading. So about 3 or 4 days, maybe 4 or 5 days max went by, and I come home one day, and I'm still living at home, I'm maybe 20 years old. My mom goes, George Romero's office? She didn't know who he was. She's like, George Romero's office called, said something about they had a part for you. I said, what? I jump in the car, I got the address, I had to show up there like that next night, so I head on down there, and it's the scene on the roof, and to this day, I don't even know why that scene was in the movie. I mean, if you think about it, they never went back to it. Whoever the bandits were, whatever, us 4 guys, they weren't any part earlier to that. They were never even mentioned after that. It was just that tenement scene. Who needed a bunch of banditos to be in charge of the building? So I always thought in my mind it was just something Romero threw in there for Amplis, because Amplis had Johnny Amplis, the guy that had lead Martin. And from what I remember, it was Amplis. Amplis played Martinez. I just thought that, I have nothing to back that. And I had met him because he was one of those banditos. He was the first one out the door. I was the second one, a shotgun. Shot the shotgun off, and then the next clip was me, or a clip 2 seconds, 3, 4, 5 seconds later, I jump up from behind the AC unit on the top of Romero's building, and this was shot at night. And I say my 2 lines, and Sabini had me wired up with a blood pack, and the wire ran underneath my clothes and all the way across the rooftop where a guy was sitting there reading the script. And as soon as I said my 2 lines, he pops this electrical impulse that runs up my leg and bursts this fake blood bag out of my chest, and I fall back. But I do remember this. That scene is we took that scene one time. We shot that one time. The scene that everybody saw in that movie, how quick it was, whatever, was never shot twice. That was the scene the first time the cameras rolled, and Romero gave us a stand. I mean, he was standing, he clapped. Him and his future wife, his secretary, whatever at the time, was clapping also, and that's what I remember about that night. They were like, wow, cool, that's a take. He's like, that's a take. Beautiful, guys. Thanks. Romero was thrilled. He was like, great, guys, that's a wrap, man. Awesome. He was smiling from ear to ear. Were the SWAT guys actually there? Yeah, everybody was up there. They were filming in real time. I think that's what it was. It was from the SWAT guys standing, sitting on the roof and saying their parts, to that door flying open and shots being fired and me running across the roof and blah, blah. And then there was pretty much, the blonde-haired guy gets killed, and then that was pretty much it. It wasn't a whole lot to that. See, guys, I was loving every second of it. I was loving and enjoying it and learning and watching. Another thing, really quick, easy thing that Savini did that I was amazed. You see the blonde-haired cop go down with the bullets. You know, it's a real quick scene, but he goes down. There's a quick clip of him taking the shot. You hear the shot go off, and then you see this black hole in the guy's head. He's laying down. He's staring up at the camera. And the cop, what that was Savini took a button, a regular button, and ran a thread from the back of the button, maybe about 4 feet of thread. Puts the button on the guy's head and puts putty all over the button. So, no, actually, he takes the button and he colors it with a black magic marker on the inside, right? Puts that side on the guy's forehead. And then he takes the putty and wraps it all up real nice so you don't see it. You can barely make out this thread coming off the guy's forehead, right? So the scene goes down, and one of the banditos, whatever, I think it was Amplis, he shoots the gun, just a regular gun, and then you see this cop fall down, the blonde-haired cop, and you see, then all of a sudden you see this black hole in the center of his head. Somebody just pulled the thread. He just pulled the thread and pulled the button off his head, and there was this whole black hole in the middle of the guy's head. It took Savini like 2 seconds to do it. I thought it was pretty cool. And then he did me, like he wired me up, and there was a cord running all the way down my pants and running all the way across the top of the roof. And that guy's sitting there, and he's just watching the script. And as soon as I said my lines, he knew what to do. He hits this little thing, and this thing explodes. I fall back. Looks like I fall off the roof, but I really fall on like a mat that's right behind a scene. And then later, like a month or two later, I'm working, got a job with Merry-Go-Round, which was in the Monroeville Mall. Now, I had worked in Monroeville Mall since I was a kid. I lived 2 miles, 3 miles down the road in a little development called Eastmont, right off of 22. It came out at the Monroeville Mall, ironically. There was a movie theater right behind the Monroeville Mall, and I mean, it was jam, bro. When I tell you, when this movie came out, like in our hometown, it was like the hugest thing ever. Just to get, you couldn't even get near the theater, actually. You really couldn't. But I did get in there on one of the opening nights, either an early Saturday or something. I went up there and took a date. It was kind of cool. You know, I'm sitting there with this girl, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be coming up in this movie. And there is a scene, like a split second or a second and a half, when the whole screen is my face. So I was like, yeah, that's me right there. Yeah, I don't know. If you're a horror fan, how can you not love that movie? But it was just so ironic, because I worked at the Monroeville Mall for many years, and it was funny just seeing all the zombies walking past the Brown Derby and on the ice skating rink and the stairs that were at each end of the mall and the big clock, and just to watch on the movie screen what you see every day, where you go every day. And I get a kick out, like when I'm on the website and I'm looking, somebody's like, yeah, I went on vacation, I went to the Monroeville Mall, you know, because that mall must have really freaked everybody out when you think about it. You know, a bunch of zombies running loose in a mall. That's brilliant. It's genius. Because you can live. I mean, there was catacombs behind that mall. Like, I knew that mall inside and out, my friend. I worked for 3 or 4 different stores there over a period of about 4 years. And, you know, if I'm not mistaken, and you guys would know more than me on this, but, and I've always been told this, that Monroeville Mall, although it looks nothing now like it did then, I understand it was one of the first enclosed malls in the entire country. So I've always been told that from other people from PA, from Pittsburgh. I'm from that area, and that's all I've ever heard was Monroeville Mall was like the first mall. And like, we were always closed on Sundays. Like, if we were in the car business or whatever, everybody was closed on Sundays. When Monroeville Mall opened up in that area, and they were open on Sundays, and a lot of the other businesses started being open on Sundays. But yeah, it was a great mall to work in. And the ice skating rink, nobody talks about that. There was a huge ice skating rink. And if you think in the movie, there's a clip where the zombies are on the ice skating rink. You can see like they're walking and falling. It's a real short, real blurb, quick little thing. But yeah, that mall, when it originally opened, had a huge ice skating. And that was the coolest thing about it. Everybody was indoors. You would come and you could walk from above and look down into the ice skating rink. You know, it was cool. That was very unique about it. The Pomodoro's was an Italian restaurant downstairs, I believe. It was downstairs about the center of the mall, and I didn't frequent that place often, but it was definitely close enough that it could have had windows on that side that could have been facing into the ice skating rink. Well, there was a little place right outside the ice skating rink called Papa Go-Go's. They did the hot dogs and the soft drinks, and that first job I ever had, and it was there, Papa Go-Go, right directly outside or next to the ice skating rink. Merry-Go-Round was a very trendy clothing store. It was funny because we got in trouble. The manager was a lunatic, and he cranked the speakers so loud that when you walked in the front entrance of the mall, you could hear you could hear their music coming out of merry-go-round that basically saturated the entire mall. They were flying left and right. They actually came in, and I was working there. They came in and took the speakers right out of the wall. Corporate came in and just took the speakers out of the wall and said, "You're done, no more music." It was a clothing store, high-end. There was another one called Proving Grounds that was downstairs. I think that was out of New York. Merry-go-round was out of Maryland. And they had a chain, and they did good. They were very profitable. I don't know whatever happened to them, but they were opening up like mad. And they were a pretty popular chain back in the 70s. They did the motorcycle scene. It was so cool. I was working that night. So we were closing up that night, and all you could hear were these bikes. These bikes were coming in from outside. We're working on an inside mall. All of a sudden, you're like, it sounds like a gang of bikes are coming through the center of the mall. So we all went outside the stores. We're looking over the railings, and here they are, man. Here comes Romero and his crew. They were coming in for, like, at night and on Sundays, like, for a couple of months, man. They were coming up and showing up and filming. So it was cool. It was fun to see them all walking in. The guys bringing all the cables and all the props, and everybody sitting down and getting all their makeup on. It was really cool. It was different. It was very exciting to be living in, like you said, and it was very exciting to be in that area at that time. And I would kick myself in the ass that I didn't know, because I was so tired from working, retail, working 10, 12 hours, and they're coming in on a Saturday. You just work 12 hours. You don't want to hang out. You want to go. Now I wish to God I would have just hung out more. Because I know George, if I would have walked up, like, I didn't even know it, because I didn't work at the mall when I was down there with him. And I went back up to the mall because the money was better, so I went back up there. If I would have gone to him and said, "George, man, yeah, anything I can do," I'm sure he would have found something. I would have done something, standing here at a Zombie there, whatever. And would have been more memories that I could have cherished at that time. But, oh man, I kicked myself in the ass for that. I walked out of there where they were in there filming. They're in there actually filming the movie. And I'm going home. Like, how stupid was that? But it was cool, and I got a check. He sent me a check. I had no idea. I had to sign that I was, working with them or whatever. And I didn't realize it. But yeah, I got a check for like $100 and some odd dollars, or maybe $136 or $168, something like that. I should have kept it, and I should have framed it. If I would have known the movie was going to be the cult hit that it was, and I should have realized Night of the Living Dead, Jesus, a low-budget flick that made God knows how many millions, that Dawn of the Dead was going to be a success. But it was fun, man. I loved being every part. I loved every second of it. It was a great experience, so I cherish it. I'd love to get back into acting someday. You get married, you have kids, you got a mortgage, the deals. But someday, hopefully, you never know. You never know.
I've done some hopefully exhaustive and certainly personally exhausting deep dives on deceased actors appearing in the early moments of this movie. Joe Shelby, with or without an extra E in the spelling, is blessedly not the subject of one of these endeavors. Don was the first of nearly 40 years of screen roles, including other Romero films, and he's still with us. Drawing from a pair of found audio interviews, we're just going to focus on his early life and the first of his 3 roles in Dawn, plus a little extra. He'll even shed a little light on the still unidentified bearded 4th man on the roof fighting the cops with Martinez.
We now bring you a very special interview with Dawn of the Dead's Joe Shelby.
Back in the day, when I was younger, I went to the boys' club. I learned how to do molding and photography. When I was 14, 15, I was an usher in a theater, watched The Great Escape numerous times to where I knew exactly when to open the doors to let the people out by the music. 8th grade, I played Army Man, Iwo Jima. And then I ended up going to the Art Institute in Pittsburgh 1 year, which I paid for myself. Back then it wasn't that expensive, but I couldn't afford to complete college, so I had to drop out. Ran a theater, eventually lived in the theater. I didn't run the theater until the 70s, and then I lived in the theater above the stage, me and my girlfriend Sharon, for 9 years, and I almost made the Guinness Book of World Records for living in a theater the longest, but I missed by, I think, a year or 2. I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Musser and Mike Christopher. They were in a band, Fluid. I managed those guys, so I had them living in the basement of the theater. I got into a play with the 2 lead zombies from Dawn, Sweater Zombie and Nurse Zombie. Clayton and Sharon Hill were friends of mine. They were in this play. Name of the play was Mischievous Ghost. And the director came up to me and said, "I want you to be in this play." I said, "I don't know what I can do." He said, "You can be the pilot in the plane." And Sharon was a stewardess, and I pull her on my lap when I'm flying, was my big scene. Then they had a couple of minor parts for me where I was just sitting at tables I enjoyed it. So I ended up being in the play, and I got bit by the acting bug. Unfortunately, I went to California to try to get into movies, and I'm walking down the street, and I'm looking at a marquee, and it says, Night of the Living Dead, filmed in Pittsburgh, PA, and I was like, you gotta be shitting me. I came all the way to California to get in movies, and they're making movies in Pittsburgh. Did 2 short films for the Lees brothers, Mickey and Lenny. He was Machete Zombie, and Mickey was continuity on. Mickey and Lenny had told me George was doing a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. He was getting ready to cast. So myself and Sharon, we all went down to make a resume to him. So I didn't have a resume typed up then. I just went ahead, wrote a resume, and I had a photo. And that's how I got introduced to George. Mickey had told me, because he was in touch with George more than Lenny was at the time. Lenny was in college, so Mickey was kind of freelancing. I believe it was Mickey that told me, told us. He came over to the theater and told us. Went down to George's office and presented it to him. He told me, he says, okay, well, we'll get in touch with you. He did get back to Clayton and Sharon first. They had told me, George cast us as lead zombies. I had a record store next to the theater. I waited and waited and waited, and it was probably around 3 months. And then I got a call from Christine Forrest, and she said, George would like you to come down to Leighton Image tomorrow. He wants to shoot your scene. Martinez. I was like, wow. I was kind of geeked. I was like, yeah, all right. So I went down, and I had no idea. And when I got there, my hair was really long. I guess you've seen some old pictures of me. I wish it was still really long, but it's kind of gone. Went down the drain in the shower. When I got there, George said, give Joe Shelby the chrome-plated gun. I had the vest that John Amplis wore and the bandana that he wore. I took down with me, and George said, take it off, put this shirt on. Get him 2 shirts because we're going to squib him. I think he originally wanted John Amplis as Martinez, but I think he liked my look. I believe the way Tom had made him up, he didn't look as Chicano as I did, as natural. They set me up to do the scene. He told me, when I call action, I want you to come out the door, hit this mark, fire the gun, and then take off. So I did that, and then I brought 3 guys down with me to be in it. And I was trying to think, I think there was like 7 of us. Really funny, in Pittsburgh at the time, there was a guy running around with a shotgun shooting people's doors. He was opening, people would open their door and he'd shoot a shotgun. Point Park College was right by where we were filming. So I guess a couple of the kids at school called the police and said, hey, there's somebody shooting a shotgun over on a roof next door to us. So they had the police come down, and one of the guys we had as a raider was an FBI agent. So he just went downstairs and told the police. He said, no, we're shooting a movie. But they never did catch that shotgun and kill her. That was pretty bizarre. That was a pretty intense scene. I actually dove across the roof without no pads or anything, and I still got some black marks in my elbows from the tar roof. Nothing to stop the blunt. I was so pumped to do it, and it was so cold, I couldn't wait to get the shot done, and it worked out. I mean, I loved it.
Paul Macaluso, John Amplis, and one other gentleman, a bearded guy. Do you know who that guy is with the beard? Flannel shirt and a beard?
Yeah, I brought him down here. He worked at a record store. A friend of mine owned a record store in Swissville here. I can't remember his name. He has passed away. I could have probably called his old boss and got his name. It was so long ago, I forgot what his name was. But I remember bringing him down because I said, hey, I'm doing a scene for Dawn of the Dead. And I said, you want to come down? He said, yeah. So he got squibbed. I think he gets shot in the chest. I come out, hit the mark. Didn't even know I was shooting the SWAT guy because there was nobody there. And then they put all these squibs on my back. At the time, it was 22 below zero with the wind chill. When these squibs went off and all that blood ran down my pants, I was an icicle. They got a couple moving quilts and covered me up after I got shot. After we were done with it, that really pumped me up. And then I asked about makeup. George said, sure, we need need some people to make up zombies. So I took a lot of days off from my record store. I had somebody come in and work for me. I was assistant makeup to Tom Savini at the mall. So I was out at the mall pretty much every day. And it snowed over a foot of snow. And George came up to me and he says, hey, I want you to come down and see the dailies. And I said, I don't drive. He says, well, I'll get somebody to drive you. So he got Jeannie Jeffries. And I knew Jeannie. We did a show at the theater. It was called Magic at the Roxy. It was David Copperfield's first live show. He was 18 years old. Jeannie and another model brought Franco Harris and Joe Green out, and they tested the locks on. The great Randy got put into a milk container, and they put padlocks around it. She was a model in there, so I knew her from then. She was there every day. She was Tom's pretty much right-hand woman. I'm still great friends with her. Still great friends with Tom. I have a 4th of July picnic every year Tom comes to. It was snowing to beat hell. We trudged down through the parkway and went to the office. Went in and sat down for the dailies, and George was all excited. And it was the scene that we did. So I actually got to see me shooting the SWAT guy and getting blown up. And he came over and shook my hand and said, good job. I don't think there was too many people there. Wooly was there, me and Jeannie, Tom, Savini, and George and Chris, and Mike Gornick. I was excited after that. I seen the look on George's face. He was all excited. I had heard him mention in the past that sometimes he would start out with a scene that gave him some juice. I said, can we watch that again? He goes, hell yeah. We were doing basic zombies. Tom was doing all the prosthetics and everything. I did get a chance to do some prosthetics on the people, but one of the funniest, I think, was the bars would close at 2 o'clock, and these people would come in after the bars were closed, and they'd be half drunk or drunk. Would sit and make them up, and everybody was reeking from alcohol. We had a little bit of a delay, so I want to say there was close to 200 people in this room. I left to go see what was going on, and I came back and I opened the door up, and there was 200 people laying on the floor sleeping, which was a howl. I had to go get some people and say, hey, come and look at this. Because Clay and Sharon were friends of mine, I did their makeup the first day, and then Tom told me, he says, oh, I'm doing their makeup. They're lead zombies, so I'm going to do their makeup. And I said, oh, okay, no problem. But they came to me to do their makeup because I guess they really didn't know that Tom had to do the leads. Yeah, I enjoyed making the people up and then watching them do their thing. There were some people that were dressed up from being out in the clubs. They still wore the clothes that they had on, even though they got some blood on them or whatever. They didn't care.
From a quick perusal of Memories of the Living Dead, Zombies Tell All, compiled by Bob Macaluso, Mike Christopher, who played the Hare Krishna zombie, noted that around 1977 or so, the Fluid Band began living and rehearsing in the basement of the Leona Theater, an 1,800-seat theater located in Homestead, Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh. Originally named Stahl's $1 Million Theater, it cost $1 million when it was first built. The basement had a stage and was used to hold dances when it was first built. The theater was quite run down by 1977 and was showing movies for $1. Joe Shelby, Martinez, from Dawn of the Dead, was managing the theater and the Fluid Band. The new Leona Theater had several storefronts along the street. One of them was a large fish store called Tanks-A-Lot. The large, rotund zombie in Dawn was the owner of the fish store. He also bought a hearse from the Fluid Band when we broke up. Lee Cummings was his name, I believe. I guess it was through contacts made at the Leona Theater. Fluid met filmmakers Mickey Lees and his brother Leonard Lees. The Fluid Band recorded the soundtrack for A Ride Through the Fields and Head Prints, which were both films made by the Lees brothers. The Fluid Band members had lead parts in Head Prints as well. The connection to Joe Shelby came through John Paul Musser, who is the sax player for Fluid, as well as the plaid shirt zombie who gets killed while the helicopter lands for fuel.
The opening where I got killed, and then I started recruiting people from the area over in Homestead, and I got the guys from the band, and I said, hey, at the time George was only paying $1 zombies. I told him I had a group of bald guys that's a band, and he said, bald guys? He said, yeah. And he says, I'll give them $25. So I went back to the theater, and I told him, I said, hey, I gotta get you guys some money. You can buy some cigarettes and food instead of leaning on me. Little did that I know that become icons in the movie. I brought quite a few people from Homestead. The guy that bites Scotty, I brought him out. Robert Saunders, banjo. I brought some of the guys that got killed on the hill when the hunters were shooting. One of the last guys to fall on top of the hill. There's a black guy in the scene with Clayton Hill on the escalator, Ed Ford. And there was a guy that came in my record store. He only had one arm. He had a prosthetic arm. And I said, hey, you want to be in a movie? And he was like, yeah. Well, I told George, I said, hey, I have a guy that has a prosthetic arm. He's willing to take his arm off. George said, really? I said, yeah. So he said, yeah, bring him out. So I think you can see him in the movie where he's pawing on the side of the truck, one of the empty trucks. And I ran into a county sheriff who was a Homestead cop at the time, and he said, hey, I'll be a motorcycle zombie cop. I ran up on George, and he said, nah, I don't want no cop zombies. I had seen him later on. He was like, hey, remember I was going to be a zombie cop? And I said, yeah. I said, George didn't want you. And he said, yeah. He said, man, I wish I could have been in there because, man, the way the movie turned out, I never expected it to be that good. And when we went to the premiere down in Pittsburgh, I was in line with my mother, and Rich Rubenstein had come up the line, and he spotted me, and he said, come with me. So I said, come on, Mom. So he takes us in, we get down, and he puts us in the front row. Needless to say, my mother never seen people getting destroyed like that by zombies. And we're down in the front row, and she's like, oh, my God, Joe. I'm sorry, Mom. You know, I mean, Rich gave us seats down in the front. Yeah, she was kind of terrified by that. She actually didn't even recognize me getting blown up in the beginning, my back blown on, which I thought was, I mean, it happened to me quite a few times. I was in a movie, I'd be in a TV movie, and I'd call her up after the movie was over, and I'd say, hey, did you see me in there? She said, no. I got so wrapped up in watching the movie, I forgot to look for you. Mom, you didn't recognize your own son? I said, I have it on tape. We'll have to watch it again. Yeah, she'd get wrapped up in watching the movie and forget to look for me, which was funny. I've only done a couple things theater-wise. I did do George Romero's favorite opera, Tales of Hoffman. I was a late comer for the play. They didn't have me in the program. So George was there, and I invited Clay and Sharon to see me in the opera. None of us crossed paths while that happened. And then later on, George and I were at a convention, and we went outside to smoke a cigarette. And I said, Tales of Hoffman, your favorite play? He's like, yep, favorite opera. I said, I was in it when you watched it. He was like, no. I was like, yes. I said, I was Hoffman's double. So he was cracking up.
You were at Bloodsucking Pharaohs, which Deborah was also in that one. What do you remember about that?
Well, working with Baffico, who killed me, and Don, he was the director of that. You know, I shuffled around on that one, too. There's a scene of me and a girl sitting at a table in a Manny Brothers sandwich shop. That made it into the movie. I played a cop at the police station, and that didn't make it. I was a hood in a scene, and I pulled Prince's phone out of my coat. Yeah, everybody laughed.
David Crawford, a.K.A. Dr. Foster, noted in an interview, I see Joe Shelby. He's a bartender at Heinz Hall, and when I'm doing a show at the public theater, sometimes I see him at the 7-Eleven picking up cigarettes or something. He's a nice guy, Joe.
A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, I know.
This is John.
What's his name, Rodriguez or something? Or?
Yeah, I don't know. Does he have a name?
I don't know. He plays a Puerto Rican.
Right.
There he is right there with a wig on. And
yeah, right.
One seeming debate within the fandom is which actor is playing the tenement mastermind, Martinez. I think most people assume it's the character portrayed by John Amplis, because he's the most visually striking. I recall seeing Charlie Chan in The Curse of the Dragon Queen as a child with my grandmother during its very brief theatrical run. I think Mama was an Angie Dickinson fan. Anyway, it bombed to the box office, and even in 1981, I remember seeing an entertainment news program take the film to task for trafficking an Asian stereotype, and casting Sir Peter Ustinov in the starring role. Latino representation was pretty sparse in media at the time, and outside of Chico and the Man or Sesame Street, it wasn't very flattering. I have to at least hope that a director of Spanish descent like Romero would have looked at the his Caucasian actor and grotesque brown face, and thought he should at least downplay his role somewhat. When prompted in the earlier interview, Paul Macaluso expressed his belief that Amplas was cast as Martinez, which Joe Shelby also acknowledges. However, Shelby was a last-minute addition to the cast, and Macaluso only worked for the production for a single night. Shelby comes out of the door first, barking orders to his cohorts. He's followed by Amplas, who is literally listed on IMDb as second guy on roof when I started this podcast. Shelby is given the chrome pistol, which he uses to claim the only cop casualty for the resistance. Macaluso states that Martinez was the first man out of the door and the one who shoots Rod Tucker in the head. I'm not convinced Macaluso knows Amplas from Shelby, both of whom stayed on for the rest of the production. I think Shelby would have a better idea of who he played and plenty of time to be corrected. Further, Joe Shelby's character calls out "Rico, look out" before being gunned down. The only tenement resistor still alive on that roof was played by Amplas, who Roger tries to bring in alive. The SWAT officers were unquestionably targeting Martinez, so there's no way he was getting out alive. Finally, Amplas takes the place of a character who explicitly is not Martinez from the next minute of the screenplay. Amplas is Rico, Shelby is Martinez, as the actor himself has asserted. Amplas got to be Martin and went on to a featured role in Day of the Dead. Just let Shelby have this already, and somebody should go correct the current IMDb listing.
I think right before I was getting ready to shoot another scene, I said, "Do I say Martinez?" He said, No, you're Martinez. I said, "Oh, okay."
ZombiCast has now released an episode in 15 months, despite my having set up a template for it while wrapping the last release. That's 65 weeks of my being reminded of the gap while preparing other podcasts. Part of it was that I broke myself by doing an hour-and-a-half episode of intense research and writing covering everything from the Great Migration to the history of SWAT to the lengthy film career of a former college football player, and closing with a far-left agitator who got into porn and died after a final film seeking to exonerate an accused cop killer supposedly framed by the FBI. I was proud of the result, but it was a lot. Another problem, though, was that I started tackling the long line of unauthorized Italian sequels to Dawn of the Dead, or more specifically, the Dario Argento edit known in Europe simply as Zombie, ending in the letter E. I'd watched the first sequel to Lucio Fulci's Zombi, but also the second fake sequel to Dawn, this dubbed Zombie 3, no E. Well, there was an E, and actually a lot of them. I went E! When I lost the writing work that I had done on Zombie 3, and also I was doing the work out of sequence, so I'd already written up 2 more sequels besides. I couldn't bring myself to start again, and I did mention the last episode was already shy of feature film length. There was no room or gas left for 3 Italian zombsploitation flicks. But hey, an unqualified federal judge has decided the pandemic is over, so we can celebrate by having our brains bashed in by the directorial tag team of Lucio Fulci and Bruno Mattei, names long associated with the absence of quality. Despite my snarky preamble, Zombie 3 is the best of the zombie sequels, which admittedly lacks the prestige of being the best of the Return of the Living Dead sequels. I personally haven't seen an entry of the Sharknado franchise, but Zombie never defined an entire television network, so I have to assume Ian Zierling is above doing a zombie sequel. I just want to establish a baseline. Zombie 3 is a clear bridge between the Crazies, Reanimator, and the Resident Evil games. The emphasis here is on science run amok and paramilitary malfeasance. A scientist experience with a reanimating agent called Death 1, but its suspiciously hairless and glass-encased first human test subject fares poorly. After pulling a series of comically stupid faces, the subject begins spewing thick green ooze and deteriorates into a one-piece shadow latex puppet. Since there's no hinges or opening, the puppeteer just kind of wiggles his fingers like he's working a plastic shop bag. The zombie ultimately bursts through the glass case, but that seemed to be more or less the end of it. The scientist calls his superior to resign from the project, but as he's preparing to have the samples of Death 1 transferred by helicopter, a faction of enemy soldiers kill their way to the case. Only one of the enemy agents makes it far from the bullets of a counteroffensive, and the villain is separated from the ruptured case, but not before cutting his hand on a vial of Death 1. He makes his way to a nearby resort, checks to a room, and rapidly turns into the murderous undead. Despite the Philippine setting, these are classic Italian zombies, with thick, pustulant, necrotic makeup heavy on blacks, whites, and greens. The makeup effects are cartoonish and unconvincing, but that's part of their grotesque charm. A decade on, they're still using a film stock similar to Dawn's, so the colors are vibrant and the image crisp in that unreal, semi-soap opera way. It isn't long before Impatient Zero is killing and infecting his way through the resort, and the Western Army operation behind Death 1 has sent in their troops in biohazard suits. Well, anyway, cheap industrial plant one-piece zip-ups, gas masks, and M16s from out of the Romero surplus store. They proceed to gather all the guests and staff for execution and disposal in a mass grave, refreshingly bereft of euphemism in that third world way. They do their best to recreate Return of the Living Dead shot for shot. As the military cremate Impatient Zero against the protestations of the scientists, there's a shot of the chimney, and voiceover warning of the smoke contaminating the area with Death 1. There's also a shot of a flock of unidentifiable birds in a frenzy. Capcom special. Cut to flirtatious civilian women on a touring bus and off-duty horny military in a jeep. I watched enough badly dubbed after-hours Italian softcore of the 80s to be achingly disappointed at the lack of sexy time to follow. We instead cut to the last of our meat for the grinder, a bickering couple with sibling energy on a road trip. In a plot device from the Warriors, we'll also have running commentary from a Quiet Storm black radio DJ for the rest of the picture, killing the buzz with warnings of climate catastrophe. Are we sure it isn't the 90s already? Before long, the birds descend to peck the life out of people, spreading the infection. Now, in reality, what happened was that initial director Fulci hated the movie he filmed and abandoned it to a sluggish 70-minute director's cut, which was further trimmed by other parties to 50 minutes. To save the production, second unit director Mattai did extensive reshoots with new actors, claimed as up to 40% of the finished film, although credited screenwriter Claudio Fragasso also ghosted some of the direction. Appropriate given that Fragasso's wife, Rosella Drudy, actually wrote the majority of the script that caused Fulci to quit in the first place. This should have been disastrous, but instead all the different threads give the picture scope and keep things moving between the Death One project, the GIs, and the tourists, who are further fractured as the outbreak progresses. Despite the three directors, the cinematography is consistent, and the Keystone Cops meet Kung Fu's sped-up action sequences hop as much as the zombies themselves, all under a synth score that slaps. With so many characters vying for screen time, there's a definite sense of no one being safe, enhanced by the video game plotting of something constantly springing out of a corner at them. Ain't no ocean across the ocean, the extras go hard. Zombie 3 arrives too late and is clearly too indebted to better films to be anything but a footnote. But at a swift 90 minutes of terror, violence, and overall disregard for human life, this is the only zombie ending in I that I'd watch for entertainment value. It's very much the Paul W.S. Anderson of Italian zombsploitation, all style and no substance. But the only substance we can reasonably expect from these things to begin with is bristle and maybe some dirty parts. The thing hurting it against Fulci's not-so-original Zombie is a lack of pioneering in the fields of injury to the eye motif and live shark wrestling. As of this writing, you can watch it all but commercial-free in high-quality video on the YouTube channel Kings of Horror. They're going to throw a couple of Liberty Mutuals at you, and then you can go right into the movie without interruption. Given Stefano Mainetti's Galvanesque score of Zombie 3, the cheesy balladry of Life After Death by Al Festa that opens the 1989 sequel, Oltre la Morte, hints that in the span of just a year, Italy is transitioning from 70s madness to 80s formula. If only After Death, released mostly in Japan as Zombie 4, could aspire to be formulaic. Supposedly filmed across 2 sleepless weeks by Zombie 3 co-screenwriter Claudio Fragasso, from a screenplay entirely by his wife Rosella Drudy, this final, sorta, kinda, entry is so incompetent that it may have killed the Italian zombie genre. Afterlife begins with a voodoo witch doctor casting a spell down his wife's throat that causes the earth to open up and swallow her into an abyss. I say again, that's how it starts, directly after the credits. Prior to that, there was the equivalent of a Star Wars text scroll that was audio only, where a throbbing red energy mass eventually comes into focus as the movie's logo. Here, I'll just play it for you.
There was once a group of men who believed they could solve the mystery of mysteries. They were scientists, experts in chemistry, biology, and physics, students of alchemy and of the arcane principles which govern the very equilibrium of our universe. These men established a small research center on a remote tropical island where they proceeded with their humanitarian mission, a task linked to the fundamental principles of our very existence. Their aim was to conquer mankind's first, oldest, and greatest enemy, death itself.
So jump from that to an armed group of white researchers as they confront the witch doctor in a match to see who could offer the most non-contextual exposition.
What have you done, you bastard? It was you, wasn't it? You who started the epidemic, the evil that is wiping out our community. You raised the dead to feed on the living. You planned it. Answer me, damn you!
You were the ones who started. You wanted to defy hell. And now hell has accepted the challenge.
What are you talking about? We came here in peace. We didn't want any trouble.
You invaded our homes. You even used us for your research.
Where's your wife?
My wife is in hell. She is now one with our daughter. But she will be back soon to avenge her.
He wants us all to die from that awful disease. We must do something to stop him before he murders us with his spells and his magic. With voodoo.
That's right.
Yeah, kill him.
That's right.
Okay, that's enough now. Be quiet.
We didn't have anything to do with your daughter's death. We tried to save her. But she had an incurable disease, cancer. Our purpose on this island was to study cancer and other diseases that have always afflicted mankind. But we're scientists, not witch doctors. Sometimes through our research we succeed in discovering a cure. Other times we don't. We did all that we could to try to save her. But she's dead now, and none of your curses can bring her back to life.
You're wrong. And you'll soon have the proof.
He may be scaring the rest of you. And if you guys haven't got the guts to shoot, I ain't afraid to.
One of them guns down the witch doctor, but then his zombie wife jumps out of the pit and proceeds to kill every motherfucking white person on the island. The end. At least that's where you should stop. There's one couple with a very young blonde daughter who was given a totem necklace and sent off on her own to run away as they're being eaten by zombies. Cut to a small boat full of creepy American mercenaries, missing teeth, and a few loose women out of their league. One of them is the now adult little girl with a necklace that's the key to hell or something. The revelation that the first quarter hour of the movie was a flashback comes out of nowhere, since there's no attempt at period clothing, and the men were carrying seemingly current firearms. Anyway, the mercenaries and their mauls managed to get to the deserted island of the dead by accident and supernatural design on a tank of gas. The island makes their boat unable to steer, so they land and explore. One of the mercs sees what one would presume was a native, gives chase, beats them unconscious, and only then learns he's a zombie. Dude gets bitten, shelter is sought, and a pathway to hell is located in a cabin inevitably assaulted by Flesheaters. There's not a lot of dialogue, no plot, no characterization, the same 2 or 3 songs played on repeat. The gore effects are wet, but not impressively crafted, and are lightly applied. Aside from lifting the basic story from Zombie 2, Return of the Living Dead, Evil Dead, and Day of the Dead are stolen from as liberally as shoestring budget would allow. The cultish robed zombies recall the Blind Dead, and I guess the preponderance of rough action is something of a positive. Pretty sad when it's cheaper to get a bunch of Filipino extras to do dangerous stunt work than to buy cow intestines from a butcher shop. There's no gut munching in the budget, so get used to people spitting up fake blood and various shades of green goop, like a horror-themed episode of You Can't Do That on Television. It's the same dozen or so zombies jumping on trampolines, getting killed over and over, so don't expect the spectacle of masses or notable kills. In a burgeoning zombie tradition, there was one moment where a victim started pulling goofy faces. It would usually indicate an attempt to match a mold for some head trauma, but instead she died by way of a non-therapeutic group massage given by men with dirty hands. It's the wrong kind of gross, and yet somehow there's still no nudity? Are we certain this was Italian? Movie stars have fallen into the infamy of porn, and the occasional ingenue will carve out a small niche in the mainstream after porn. But I'm pretty sure Jeff Stryker top-lining a horror movie during his active years as a bisexual star is a unique accomplishment. It's probably the only distinction Afterlife claimed all its own, as an otherwise empty, dull, and derivative slog. It can take a lot of work to kill the undying, but Zombie 5 finally managed to finish off this lifeless quasi-franchise. Again, ironically, the Zombie No E series ended in its native Italy with Zombie 3, Lucio Fulci's only sort of sequel to Zombie. Germany likewise only counts Romero's Zombie, A.K.A. Dawn of the Dead, and the 2 Fulci zombies. For greater clarity, Romero's Zombies is a standalone picture in Britain, and the Italian series is known there as the Zombie Flesheater trilogy, which begins with Fulci's Zombie and ends with After Death. Thailand also used the Zombie Flesheaters title, but includes a 4th installment, the Italian picture Uccelli Assassini, translating as Killing Birds. This last film was produced as a standalone picture, released first in France as L'Attaque des Morts Vivants in 1988. I guess it didn't do well, probably because it's terrible and stupid. So when it hit video, it was retroactively marketed as a 5th zombie sequel in Italy and 4th zombie Flesheaters in the UK. For such a nothing picture, there's weirdly a lot of controversy over credits for the script and direction. directing. Supposedly at one point the picture was going to be about a rock band being attacked by undead Nazis, but instead it's about a very young group of academics studying a near-extinct bird in Louisiana. Despite driving a van from a presumably nearby college, everybody has fucked up non-local accents and sounds like they're reading their dialogue for the first time off cue cards. The audio is apparently synced to the live performance, which is bad, because for once overdubbing would be preferable to the spoken English. The gist is that Robert Vaughn slums in this thing, playing a character who returns from military service to catch his wife in bed with another man. He eventually slits both their throats, plus their adult babysitters, and throws a knife through the skull of a dude with a shotgun who tried to stop them. All that's left is a newborn child and an amateur aviary. Vaughn's character releases the birds, and in gratitude, one of them blinds him with its talons, including the film highlight of ripping one eye out of its socket. Otherwise, there's everything you don't want in a low-budget picture, like bird-watching montages set to harmonica played on camera, or watching a dude bike from one place to another in real time. You can buy most of the special effects pre-packaged on Halloween from Party City. The ornithologists eventually discover a long-rotting corpse in a dilapidated pickup deep in the woods. Then they squat in the supposedly empty murder house, and halfway through the filmmakers realize that the audience was nodding off or talking among themselves. All of a sudden, the lead dude academic turns out to be the newborn from the beginning of the movie, literally plays hide and seek with the blind guy, then starts seeing visions of the past and future dead, just to jazz things up for a minute. Did you notice how I just casually dropped the word ornithologists in there? That should really tell you the whole story right there. But just to illustrate, there's a 10-second, fully clothed, kissing-only sex scene. Remember that one scene in Dawn where Fran is topless that is meant to illustrate her crippling ennui? More titillating than this. We're nearly an hour in before the first zombie shows up, and the initial kill is so noisy that it makes no sense that no one comes to the rescue in time. Also, the window was right there, lady. You didn't even try. I was so bored that it opened up a second screen to watch other people's negative reviews of the movie, still playing in the first screen, and I didn't miss a goddamn thing, except maybe another repetition of the same shot of birds in flight used 19 times here. Some online reviews called for a reassessment of the film, which calls for a reassessment of the reviewers, because this is unquestionably a turd. Somebody got that free Blu-ray forgiveness. It's funny that a lot of these same sources trip out over the assertion that Robert Vaughn's eyes were intended to be digitally removed in post, apparently not realizing that wouldn't necessarily mean CGI would come into play. Obviously, they'd have superimposed using antiquated, janky blue screen, given that they even show TSR-80 era wireframe stick figure computer animated sex in one early scene. By the way, the only actor besides the man from U.N.C.L.E. with a Wikipedia entry is Laura Wendell, whose name you absolutely should not Google if you don't want to have to soak your hard drive in salt water afterwards. Let's just say she has a checkered filmography that could lead you to have a talk with Chris Hansen. Is he still doing that thing? I'm sure somebody is. I refuse to pay a solitary dime for this shit, and it's unfortunately disappeared off the internet archive and YouTube for several months. As of writing that a year and a half ago, I waited until it finally reappeared for free online under another alternate title of Raptors, and I'm sure we could all agree that it was not worth delaying the podcast for over a year over this. You may not believe this, but there's even more pseudo-sequels out there, numbered as high as 7, but I think we put up with enough of this sort of thing for one episode.
Granny, get the new list of rescue stations Charlie's receiving on the emergency.
Rescue stations.
20th Century Geek Podcast, Ann Labs, Antonio Santos, Baby Skeletor, Canoes, Chris Dunford, Chris Lydon, Chris Thompson, CJ, Del Dracula, Doc Strange, Dirk Ashton, El Romero, Elonda Rocks, Fire Source, Green Lantern HG, History of Comics on Film, Illegal Machine, Iowa's Joe Crawford, Jeffrey Brown, They Them, Just in Time with the J&T Baggers, Keith G. Baker, Keith Say, King Dinosaur, Mike at Send Aliens to Me, Randy Caldwell, Relatively Geeky, Richard G., Richard Van Ingram, Ryan Daly, Shanna Banana, Sean McLaughlin, Talk Nerdy to Me, Tim Mason, Oofta, and Xenozoic Xenophiles. Alonda Rocks tweeted, must share, very nice. Mac wrote, it happened again. I spaced out for 2 minutes during this podcast, and I'm completely lost. Voter suppression and the Civil Rights Act. Time to rewind and revisit when I've got more time. Odell Dracula wrote, listening to this episode late, but wow. Hearing the LA riots footage on the weekend, they're picking the jury for Derek Chauvin's trial. Oof. Is it too much to hope America has its act together by now? Or at least more together than 1992? Asking for a friend. Minneapolis. Finally, Jeffrey Brown wrote, I love Return of the Living Dead 3. I enjoy 1 and the mood of that movie and its sense of humor and cast, but I was mostly watching 3 from Melinda Clark. I had seen 3 as a kid on Sci-Fi Channel and it was such a weird movie. And I tweeted to them a t-shirt that featured the main character from Return of the Living Dead 3, rendered in the art style of Jim Balent, modeled after Balent's cover for an issue of Wizard magazine, but featuring elements from the Return of the Living Dead movie. Jeffy wrote, oh my god, I love this. This is my first time seeing this. And inevitably we'll be looking at the Return of the Living Dead movies. I haven't figured out how to address those yet. One of my best friends has been wanting to do a podcast on Return for a while now. I don't see how that would fit the format of this show, so I may have to do a couple of passes at it, but especially in the case of the first Return, I think it warrants more than one pass. I'm just not sure if it's on the imminent horizon.